Hello. I want to talk about something that we all have, but we seldom talk about it. Friendship can be just like your money. It's easy to make, but it's hard to keep. If you want to keep a friend, it takes maintenance. On average, most families in Canada, we move about 3 or 5 times every year. Sometimes making friends isn't easy. Shakespeare said, "I am wealthy in my friends." UCLA, they had a head football coach by the name of Pepper Rogers. He was having a terrible year. The team was losing, crowd was booing, his own players were fighting. One day, when he came home from practice, he had his tail between his legs because he was very discouraged. And he lamented to his wife, he had no friends. "The only friend I got in all the world," he told his wife, "is my dog." And then he said, "A man should at least have 2 friends." He thought maybe his wife would bite, and she would be that one. But instead, she went out and bought him another dog. David has just been chosen to be the new king of Israel. He doesn't know it, but he's in for a lot of suffering and a lot of pain. God's going to use him in that pain to become the greatest king that Israel ever had. And it all starts in the 18th chapter of 1 Samuel. Here's what it says. By the time David had reported to Saul at his palace in Jerusalem, Jonathan, his son, was deeply impressed with David, and he immediately bonded and forged a friendship with him. My lesson today is friendship. David is fresh out of high school, as we would do it today. He's not even 20 years old yet. Saul, the king, he told him that he was going to not go back to the farm, nor tend his sheep after he had slain Goliath. He has to come and move into the palace and live there with him. That was the instruction he gave to David after the slaughter of Goliath. He no sooner arrives there at the palace when he's going to meet somebody that's going to completely change his life. It's Saul's son named Jonathan. He's 30 years old, 12 years older than David. He served in the military and he commands over 1,000 men. Being the son of the king, he was heir to the throne when Saul dies. That makes his loyalty and his affection for David all the more special. He loved his father, but he also loved David. And he knew that he would never be king, even though he was the heir. David would one day replace his father as the king over Israel. In a very short time, Saul turned on David. He was jealous. He was jealous of David. He was full of fear. And that fear increased. And he thought that David, if he could slay Goliath, he would also be able to kill him. His jealousy turned to hatred. Jonathan, his son, he was caught in the middle. He was driven by defiance. He defied his father behind his back, but he also remained very loyal to this young 18-year-old by the name of David. That's friendship. And that's what I want to examine today in our lesson. Until this moment, in the palace, David and Jonathan had never met. Then something happened. 18th chapter of 1 Samuel, beginning at verse 1. It came about when David had finished speaking to Saul that the soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David. And Jonathan loved him, even as himself. David would not have made it to the throne without this man. Intimate friends are very hard to find. In your lifetime, chances are you may have one. I doubt if you've had more than two. We often call them kindred spirits. Water, food, and shelter are requirements for humans to thrive. The same can be said for friendship. God created us to have friends. That's called friendship. And that friendship is one of the most critical connections that we can make in our lifetime. Whether it's school chums, the mate that you're going to choose to become your wife or husband, that colleague at work, your priest or your pastor. It could even be your nurse or your personal doctor. From your earliest moments here on earth, your friends have profoundly impacted all your attitudes and all your behaviors. Not many know it, but friendship is really the essential part of life. When you're down, where do you go for support and encouragement? When you become a pain in the neck, who sticks up for you? When your heart's been broken, who brings you a milkshake? Looking back over your life, those close friends have really only been a handful. That's all it is. There are some principles in friendship that happened between David and Jonathan that I want you to look at with me. And I want you to help me sort them out and just see if we can't transfer them to us. Here's the first one. Promote the other above yourself. David had just defeated Goliath. He removes the giant's head and he brings it to King Saul in his tent. Jonathan is there, his son, and he watches this. Some friendships take a while to build. Others just seem to leap into existence, fully formed. In other words, some friendships are just completely natural. That was this one. Have you ever met anyone that you hit it off right away, right from the jump? That was David and Jonathan. After what David did to Goliath, taking him out with his slingshot, Jonathan saw in David a kindred spirit as a fighter and as a warrior. Now remember, Jonathan, he was a commander of 1,000 men, but he hid in his tent when Goliath roared down on the plain, calling the Israelites, all their troops, a bunch of cowards. Well, he was a coward. He went and hid in the tent. David, when he arrived on the battlefield, he did just the opposite. When he heard Goliath's voice and all those threats, what did he do? He ran down the hill to find 5 smooth stones there in the brook to finish the job. It only took one shot, and Goliath, he folded like a chair. He died like a fat pig. The Philistine army scattered. The Hebrew army chased them away. Jonathan watched all of this, and he couldn't take his eyes off of David. In David, he saw potential that he didn't have. And watch what he does. 18th chapter, 1 Samuel. Jonathan was deeply impressed with David. An immediate bond was forged between them. He became totally committed to David. from that point on. And then Jonathan made a covenant with him, and he proved it by giving David some gifts. He put on David's back his own royal robe as heir to the throne. He then gave him his weapons. He gave him his armor, he gave him his sword, gave him his bow and arrow, he gave him his belt, and he gave him his helmet. Do you know what Jonathan just did? He not only welcomed him into the family, he just gave him his succession, his heir to the throne of Israel. He just placed David ahead of himself. That's the first principle in a good friendship. Promote the other above yourself. Here's the second one. Loyalty at all costs. Events in the palace, they begin to unravel. David's popularity grows. King Saul's doesn't. The recent polls show that Saul's popularity is plummeting. Saul killed his thousands. David has killed his tens of thousands. Saul, in his jealousy, he now wants to kill David. In 1 Samuel 18, verse 10, the Bible describes what happened. One morning, Saul went into a rage. His mood got ugly. David was in the corner of the room playing his harp. Suddenly, Saul grabbed a spear and he threw it at David, trying to pin him to the wall. David ducked. The spear missed. Saul tried it twice. Missed again. David fled. He hid in the army barracks. Saul became more fearful. David became more successful. Saul could see the handwriting on the wall. The relationship between David and Saul completely unraveled. Jonathan, his son, he was caught in the middle. Now, King Saul is no dummy. He knows what's going on. His popularity with the people, it's completely cratered. So, his popularity with David has done the same. David, he could have finished him off. If he could kill Goliath, he would have no trouble slaying a scaredy cat. That's what Saul was. He could have finished him off and killed him. David could have been now king. It didn't happen. That's not what the book says. Here's what happened. David goes into hiding. He becomes a fugitive. He now has a price on his head. What do you think this is going to do with the friendship that he has with his buddy Jonathan? Well, I'll read it for you. You get into chapter 20 of 1 Samuel. You get down to verse 41, and here's what it says. David, he got up from his hiding place behind the boulder. He fell on his face to the ground before Jonathan, and he did this 3 times. 3 times. He got up, they kissed one another, and they wept, friend over friend. David weeping especially hard. Jonathan said to him, "Go in peace. The 2 of us have vowed friendship in God's name. God will be the bond between you and between my children and your children forever." The word bond in the Hebrew is the word glue. It's the same word in the Greek when you come into the New Testament in a marriage vow. A man shall leave his father and mother and cleave to his wife. The word cleave is the word glue. Same glue is found here in the Hebrew, only that one in Greek. They parted. They never saw each other again. Heartbroken friends, embraced and weep. David's very life was at stake. His future is scary and it's very uncertain, and his closest friend has just disappeared. Have you ever felt that way? When your friend has left you and you felt completely abandoned? We've all had that happen. What a friend Jonathan was for David. There was no envy. There was no jealousy. There was no pettiness. There was no competition. Jonathan was heir apparent. Don't you think that he wanted to be and hear the praise of the people like David was getting? He stood in defense of his friend against his own father, who was out to kill him. When your heart is broken, can you bleed over the shoulder of your pal and he understands? If you can, that's real friendship. That's loyalty. And that's loyalty at all costs, because that friend, he understands. David out in the wilderness, at that moment, from behind any bush and behind any rock or any tree, Saul and his men are waiting to ambush him, and nothing but murderous hatred has haunted him down. And what does the son of that hit man do? Jonathan? He finds David, scared, in the lowest moment of his life, and he shows him his loyalty. That's a powerful principle. And I must say, there aren't very many that have it. There's one more principle of friendship that I want to leave you with, and I'm simply calling it, don't forget. Don't forget your friend. Both Saul and Jonathan, they're going to die on the same day, on the same battlefield, in the same war. David is going to be free. He's going to become the next king. Listen to what he said when he learned of the death of his friend Solomon, or rather Jonathan. You have to move ahead to 2 Samuel now, chapter 1, and get down to verse 25. Listen to this description. What went on in the heart of David after he heard that Jonathan had died. The mighty warrior has fallen. In the midst of the fight, Jonathan struck down on the hills. Oh, my dear brother Jonathan, I'm crushed by your death. Your friendship was a miracle wonder of love for me, far exceeding anything that I've ever known or anything that I ever hoped to know. Wow. David's friendship with Jonathan supported him in ways that no one else could. And you know, there is no relationship that can meet all your needs. I don't care if you've got a soulmate. I don't care if you got somebody that's a kindred spirit. They're not going to meet all your needs. But there are friendships that become very sacred and they become very special. That's what this one did. They're powerful words that David expressed when he remembered his friend. He didn't forget. He could have just said when he heard that the king and the heir had been dead, "Great. All right. Finally, I'm going to be the new ruler of our nation." No. That's not what he said, and that's not what he thought. He said just the opposite. A mighty warrior has fallen. My dear brother, I'm crushed. Your friendship exceeded anything that I have ever known. Living as a Christian is hard. Have you found that? It's not easy. It's tough out there. G.K. Chesterfield, he said, the Christian ideal has not been tried and found wanting. Rather, it's been found difficult and left untried. A good friendship is a divine and a device that's going to help you fight back. Remember these three principles. 1, promote another above yourself. 2, make it loyalty at all costs. 3, don't forget your friends. I am wealthy in my friends, said Shakespeare. In my office, I have on the wall what I call Hebrews chapter 11, cloud of witnesses. Since I've taken over this job as teacher to the class that you're watching, I've had 37 funerals in the last 5 years. And when I'm sitting there and I have all their pictures on the wall, pinned up, and when I look at their faces, I see Eric and Bill, and I see Gottfried, and I see Wayne, Morley and Miriam, and Joey and Martha, and Betty and Sherry and Frida and David, and on and on and on I could go. And you know, these are special people that I don't forget as a friend. One more thing. Old Augustine, he said it. Lord, thou hast made us for thyself, and we are restless until we rest in thee. God's waiting, and he wants you to be his friend. You'll find him very loyal, and he will never forget you. He died for you. And best of all, he wants to forgive you. His Spirit is waiting to talk to your spirit, and you couldn't find a better friend. I want you to stay with me over these next few weeks as we look at this series with David. And who knows, you and the Lord might just end up as close friends, just like Jonathan and David. I think that can happen, and I'd be happy to see it too. Well, that's enough for today. The clock on the wall is past my time. See you next week. Please come back. I'll watch for you then.